Welcome. So today we're going to look at Kingdom Monera. In our previous lesson we introduced diversity of living organisms, where we said that all organisms on this planet that are called living organisms belong to one of the 5 kingdoms, that's to say fungi, plantae, animalia, Monera and Protoctista. And so today we start to look at the kingdoms one at a time, starting with the one we call Monera. Monera is a kingdom specifically for bacteria. So you can safely call it the bacteria kingdom. However, we'll stick to Kingdom Monera. Have you heard of people say, hey, use the sanitizer to kill bacteria? Cover this food so that bacteria don't go on it. Some people make the mistake of calling them bacterias, and yet it's already plural. They are bacteria. They are too small to be seen by naked eye, and they're single-celled. So we can only see them using a microscope. Have you ever heard of someone or yourself going to the hospital and they say, we're so sorry, you have bacteremia, meaning you have some bad bacteria in your blood. The ones they're referring to are the ones we're going to study right now. And so, going to the general characteristics. Actually, for every 1 cell of your body, there are 10 more bacteria on your body. So if I have about 37.2 trillion cells in my body, well, it means I have 10 times more bacteria in my body than my own cells. It means if I have 10 cells, I have 100 bacterial cells in me or on me. Okay, so they are found literally everywhere. Now, generally, all bacteria have a cell wall. They all have a cell wall. However, it is slightly different from the other organisms. Number 2, bacteria are single-celled, meaning each organism is single-celled. However, they can live in groups, which can be in bunches or in pairs or in a strip of them. But important to notice that they are single-celled. Some bacteria are parasitic, while others are saprophytic, while others are photosynthetic. By that we mean some bacteria feed on other organisms at the cost, at the expense, at the harm of those we call hosts. Okay, and so for the most part they cause disease to that host organism. Others depend on decaying matter. That's why a dog dies and we see it, and so many days later we can't see the dog anymore, but we see the bones. Where did the skin and the intestines go? The bacteria did a great job. Some bacteria have a tail-like structure which we call the flagellum that helps them to swim. We're going to write them down. And so, these are the general characteristics of bacteria. as we have said, they are single-celled, or what we call unicellular. Unis or uni for single. Some have a flagellum. A flagellum is a tail-like structure, as we're going to see, that enables them to move. If you can imagine a fish swimming its way by help of its tail, it's the same way this flagellum works. They reproduce asexually by what we call binary fission. Fission means splitting or breaking up or dividing. Binary means two. So each bacterium, this is my bacterium, splits into two so that I have two new bacteria. Now this one's finally growing to the size and again keep splitting and splitting so that we have as many as we know they are. Or some form spores, and the spores enable them to survive during very harsh conditions, environmental conditions. Now, the cell wall is covered by mucin. Mucin is almost the same, it has the same nature as the mucus that we have in our systems. For example, our respiratory system, and it surrounds their cell wall mostly for protection and sticking together, because we said they can exist in bunches or in pairs. They lack the membrane-bound organelles that we talked about when we were studying cells. Remember, we said cells have organelles, which are the different parts of the cell that perform unique functions. For example, you remember mitochondria for respiration, chloroplast for photosynthesis, etc. for etc. They do not have these organelles. Okay. Now, we're going to look at the general structure of the bacterium. Of course, they differ one from another, but this is the general structure. So, this is the structure, general structure of a bacterium. It doesn't have many organelles as we saw with the plant and animal cells. It simply has a mesosome, a cell wall, a capsule, cell membrane, and a flagellum. Now, the mesosome is found in those bacteria that are capable of carrying out photosynthesis. Actually, the bacteria that can carry out photosynthesis. And then we have the one we call the cell membrane. The cell membrane just performs the same function as we know previously. Then the capsule. This capsule is the one we said that surrounds the cell wall, which can be important for protection, maybe against antibiotics, if you've taken any antibiotics. Sometimes the bacteria can have a capsule of protection so that they resist the antibiotics. Then the cell wall, which performs about the same function as in in the plant cells. And then the flagellum, which we talked about earlier, that is important for movement. Of course, not all bacteria have a flagellum, but those that have it are able to locomote. Some bacteria can have what we call the photosynthetic membrane. This is where their photosynthesis takes place. You remember that plant cells use the chloroplasts? Well, these ones have simply a membrane. And then the mesosome is important for respiration. So remember when we said that respiration takes place in the mitochondria in other cells? Well, here, slightly different. So I think you can almost already come up with differences between a bacterial cell and a plant cell or an animal cell. We're going to look at the different types of bacteria, the different groups of bacteria. Bacteria are classified according to different ways. We can choose to classify them according to how they feed. We can choose to classify them according to how they look, their shape, okay? And it's what we're going to use right now. We start with the first category of bacteria, and those are the bacteria that are spherical. There are some bacteria that are spherical. You know, have you ever seen the yeast people use at home? That kind of nature, but of course they are much smaller than that yeast. Now we have the first type, which we call the coco or the coccus, that are spherical shaped. We have the first type is one we simply call coccus. Then the second one, so it is simply a cell. Then the next one is the diplococcus. Di for two, so they are always two cells together, not more, not less. And so we call those diplococcus. So you have a pair of spherical shaped cells like that. And now we have the ones we call the streptococcus. Strepto meaning something like a chain of spherically shaped. So they will be attached to each other, but in a very clean chain like that. Of course, the chain can go on and on and on. And now we have the last one, which we're calling staphylococcus. Staphylo for something like a bunch. You can imagine a bunch of grapes. That is how the cells look like. They are found in every angle of, the bunch.